you'd like to share with us before we begin?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've been in crypto for more than 10 years now. The company's more than 10 years old. So, it just feels like it's been like 100 years, like crypto, stuff is changing all the time. It's a wild space. I encourage, all of you guys to try to like find jobs in crypto if you get out. And I think the next 10 years are going to be amazing. I feel like the first 10 years were like, it's kind of bizarre because like we were all focused on like trying to get people into Bitcoin and like explaining the merits of Bitcoin and why cryptocurrency is like better than a fiat currency. And all we really needed to do was put like NBA moments on the blockchain, and that would have been like, the thing that blew it all up for people. So like, it's interesting just to see like, that use case, at least in the United States, I think that the better money is like a harder sell than it is in a place like Venezuela or even El Salvador, where maybe like the monetary system or the access to financial services network isn't as great. So I think it's interesting that we've seen NFTs take off now in such a big way, and I really feel like we're getting to like the beginnings of mainstream adoption.
Okay, so take us back to your college years at Cal State Sacramento. You were a philosophy major, and you were into gaming, if I'm not mistaken. You assisted others and helped create in-game currencies, and this was back in 2001. And then you went into art, and then about a decade ago, you co-founded Kraken. So take us through that incredible journey.
Yeah, so I basically like tested out of high school when I was 16. I took the California High School Proficiency Exam. I was just bored as hell in high school, and went to community college, and then I transferred to Sac State, and was in love with like philosophy at the time, and that was my major. I eventually, after like 7 years in college, like I didn't know what I wanted to do. So, I had some friends who went on to law school, and that seemed like a nightmare. And some friends who went on to get PhDs and like, couldn't find jobs. So, and there's this guy with like a philosophy master's working at the Barnes and Noble, next to campus. So I was like, okay, like there's probably like not a whole lot of opportunities out there for getting this degree. And I started to like dabble in selling virtual goods for Diablo 2, which is this like massive game, which remaster's coming out in like a week. So get on that. So I started dabbling with like selling Diablo 2 items, and I found out that you could do this through like an old job that I had, where I was like a tech support, like over the phone tech support for an internet service provider. And we're all like in this cubicle arrangement, and everyone had a computer, but you didn't really need the computer. And this was kind of like a startup ISP, and like they didn't really care what you did as long as you were like doing the calls. And so once you had kind of like memorized all the flows for like fixing every computer problem, you kind of just like use your computer to play games. And like, that's what all the guys were doing there. And there were a bunch of guys there playing this game called Ultima Online. And in that game, you can get like castles, and you can get like die kits and all of these things that like you could sell for real money. So I was like fascinated by that. And I thought like, one day maybe I'll try to like do something with that. And, fast forward like a couple of years, I did some other stuff in between. I had a friend who started a company just like in the year 2000, right when all the companies blew up in Silicon Valley, when that bubble burst. There was this opportunity, like this is early days of PayPal and early days of eBay. And you could go to these auctions and just buy like pallets of laptops, like liquidated assets from all these like blown up tech startups. And so I was doing that with him. We were buying all this stuff and like flipping it on eBay. And then I kind of transitioned from that to the Diablo stuff. And I was just in college, and I was like, I'll just play this game and like see if I can make some money at it. And I was making about $25 an hour, just like killing monsters myself. But then figured out that there was this arb to do with eBay prices versus in-game prices. And you could basically buy an item on eBay that was worth like a $30 item in the game. So there's like massive disconnect with like the value of things. So I would like do that arb many times, like buy something for $5, trade it for the $30 item, put the $30 item back on eBay, and then like do that cycle. And I was doing that for a bit, like at pretty big scale. And then I met this dude in the game he was one of the guys I kept buying items off of on eBay. And I was like, dude, how are you getting all these items? It's like unbelievable that you can find all these items. And he was like, oh, actually, like I found this exploit in the game where I just like print these items, you know? So he found like a bug basically that allowed him to just like copy any item that you would give him. So I was like, that sounds like a lot better than like finding these items. So I made a deal with him to basically like be my supplier to like, you know, for my website, basically. Like I actually developed like a website a little bit before I met this guy it was sort of like an Amazon type of thing where like basically I had some like kind of whitelisted sellers who could post stuff for sale. And then like I would handle the payments and like, you know, facilitating the trades and stuff. But that turned out to be like a really big like customer service headache because sometimes, you know, when people buy these virtual items, they're pretty much like in the game, they have a problem, they want to feel more powerful or whatever, and they want to like get this item quickly. They don't want to wait like 4 days to get their stuff. So with this like varying degrees of like customer service and like delivery standards and all this from like having a bunch of different sellers, there was just like a lot of problems with it. So when this dude came along who was like, yeah, I could basically supply like 100% of all items, like unlimited quantities, you know, and also we could just like undercut like everyone else in the market. I was like, yeah, that sounds good. So I booted off all the other sellers and you know, actually my mom helped me make this website back in the day. She's a web developer. So that was like convenient. Yeah, I kicked off all the other sellers and that was sort of like the beginning, you know, that was like where I started hiring people to help to like do virtual item deliveries and to do customer service and stuff like that. And that company got to be like 50 people. It was all fully remote. Throughout the years, we added like 20 more games that we were selling items for. We had different models for each game. Some games we had exploits in where we would just like, you know, copy the items. Some we had vendors, basically like gold farmers in China who would like, you know, just, that was their job to play this game. That whole industry sort of like escalated to like bots playing the game. And then the dudes in China were just like one man watching like 10 bots play the game. And they tried to combat this, the game developers, by having like bot detection tools. And they would have like someone working for the game, like a GM, basically, contact who they thought was a bot in the game. And they would write them like, hey, I think you're a bot. I need you to perform a test for me to make sure you're not a bot. So, you know, like run around in a circle and jump 3 times or something like that. But what would happen is like when you would get a message from a GM, like that would be in like a different color or some, like there'd be something special about it, which the bot could detect. And so like the guys working in these gold farms basically just have this like array of like machines, like monitors and stuff. And then when they get a message from a GM, siren goes off, there's like a light flashing on the monitor. Dude just goes over there like, okay, jump, run in a circle. Okay, cool. And then the bot like continues on, you know, with its mission of like 24/7 farming. Other stuff we had like, you know, consignment deals with people. So we had all these different deals for different games, but you'd be surprised at like the number of games that have the same exploit. Like they just keep repeating like the same problem. You know, it's like every game you can like find the seed for like the random item, you know, generator, and then like reverse that and then like make any item drop you want at any time, you know, or like same kind of like trade bugs where like the client just like assumes that there are no security holes or like the client will never be manipulated and the server just trusts that like anything happening on the client is like legit. So that's kind of funny. Like, I mean, if you find an exploit in one game, like you should try it in like 20 different games and see if it works. So I did that for like 10 years. Around like 2007, the business was almost fully automated. I mean, we had like bots written for games to like do all the deliveries and often like take the inventory, do the item finding, all of this stuff. And the 50 people we had were mostly just like customer service agents and like fraud control people. Like we had basically like 10% of all of our revenue was going to basically paying for like fraud, which was related to stolen credit cards or kids getting their parents' credit card one time and then using it 10 times, you know, stuff like that. So that was always like a problem. That's sort of like one thing that kind of led me to Bitcoin later was all of the payments issues that we were having for selling digital goods. You know, it was like the minimum fee for a credit card transaction is like 35 cents plus 3%. So if you're selling some virtual item for like $1, you know, that's like 40% off the top right there of like what you've collected. So that was a problem. We were having problems with obviously chargebacks. Like, you know, if someone says they didn't receive the delivery of something they bought, the payment processor will ask you like, okay, do you have proof of delivery? And, you know, the merchant, like for a digital item, like we'll never have proof of delivery. So, you know, it's very hard to fight chargebacks. We also had like, you know, the suppliers that we were working with in China needed Chinese yuan, and we were collecting payments in dollars. So there are monetary controls in China that basically limit the amount of dollars that you can convert to yuan to $50,000 a year per person. But we were like, you know, one example, buying like $100,000 a week of World of Warcraft gold from China. So that meant every week we needed 2 brand new people for the year to do this trade. And so like, you know, over the course of the year, you have like 100+ people that you have to work with to do this. It's like everyone's cousins and like this crazy network. And there's all this like risk, you know, and like friction in the process. And then we also had like customers all over the world too, you know, like legit like Nigerian princes who are like, yeah, would you just take my credit card? Like, you know, like I'm a legit prince, like here's me with crown, you know, and you're like, yeah, right, dude. Like, of course I'm not going to take a credit card from a Nigerian prince, you know? So like guys, like legit customers, legit whales who you would love to take their business, you know, are sort of like left like with terrible options to pay you, you know, they got to do Western Union or like, you know, we had a lot of kids. Like when you think about like the unbanked, you think like, oh, that must be like people in rural India or something, but it's like basically everyone under the age of 18 and it's in the States is like unbanked. So we had a lot of customers who were like kids, they would just send like quarters in the mail. Like, you know, we get the envelope and it'd be like all tattered and there'd be like 15 cents left in it or something. So all of these problems with payments that we were having in the virtual goods business was sort of like something that I recognized that like Bitcoin potentially could solve later. But you know, around 2007, the business was mostly on autopilot, and I was like, I want to do something else. I want to get away from the computer, and like I had some friends who were artists, and I knew about like Andy Warhol's factory, and like, you know, some cool artist co-ops, and I thought like it'd be cool to like just rent a big warehouse and put a bunch of artists in it and see what happens. And so I did that, and I had a tough time getting it going because artists at first were like, what is this, like a scam? You're just like giving away like studio space, you know, you're gonna like, I'm gonna bring my stuff over, you're gonna steal my stuff, and then, you know, I know how it goes. So fortunately I had like a really prominent artist in Sacramento who was like across the street, just come over and like check it out, and she finally like vouched for the project. And that turned into like, I mean, it's still open today basically. I ran it as a commercial gallery for 3 years, which also had like 20 artist studios. And after the 3 years is up, it's 3 years because that was when that was the length of the lease for that warehouse. Basically, like it wasn't successful as a commercial gallery. There just wasn't like enough demand in Sacramento for like, you know, $20,000 like pieces of fine art. So the community loved the space. So I pitched it to a bunch of basically like a bunch of old people who were like, yeah, we would love to like form a board and like make this thing like a nonprofit and like, you know, keep it running as a nonprofit. So we found like another building, 20,000 square foot building, moved the project there, and now it's got like a board of 20 people and sort of like, you know, doing its own thing. I'm on the board still, but it's like, it's got an executive director, and the board, you know, is running it mostly without me. So that's cool. Then, yeah, I mean, so that like, this is also like sort of, that experience is like sort of made me really like attracted to like what's going on with NFTs now too. It's sort of weird how like all this stuff just comes together, like the virtual goods, the problems with payments, the art, and that's kind of like, you know, where we are now. But in 2011, I just randomly read about Bitcoin, And I thought like, oh, maybe we can sell this like World of Warcraft gold, just be like another currency. But then I just like quickly like went down the rabbit hole and I was like, whoa, this could be like way more than just like a World of Warcraft gold. This could like really change the world. And for all the reasons, all the problems that we had with payments and stuff. And we knew that people were, because of the virtual goods business, we knew that there were like kids out there using like World of Warcraft gold for like real money, basically, like a replacement for a bank account. Like we heard stories like, like I'm buying my kid this gold because when he's at school, they like to trade gold for like brownies in the cafeteria or like stuff like that. It was like a legit currency for like kids. So we knew that like, kids were like understanding this, and probably like the next generation would be, basically growing up with video games and this concept of like virtual store of value, and like, maybe money would be more than just like fiat currency. Money would be like Magic cards, Pokemon cards, World of Warcraft gold. Your wallet might have like all kinds of crazy things in it, beyond just like fiat currency. So I just saw like, and knowing about all the problems that people were having with like money around the world, like all the people excluded from the banking system, it just seemed like it was like such an awesome thing, and had such great potential for the world. So that was when I was like, I really want to like do something with Bitcoin full time. And at that time, I just basically asked my co-founder, if he wanted to like do a crypto business. He was our CTO of the virtual goods business, and he was down. So we sold our stake to our third partner, and went like all in on a Kraken business basically in 2011. It's a short version.
So that kind of leads me into some of my other questions about NFTs. A few of us are in the blockchain class, taught by Professor Chas Hales. He's a great professor. And he had a few questions. One, do you think of NFTs as digital art pieces and fan collectibles? Do you think that that's a bubble? Or does it have a future?
Yeah, so NFTs is like pretty broad. So it's basically non-fungible token, and pretty much anything could be tokenized. So art seems like the first thing that's really gained traction. But obviously, like even beyond just like what you would consider like, fine art, digital art, people are tokenizing like the NBA Top Shots are like moments, like video clips. Other things that could be NFTs are like proof of ownership, concert tickets. It could be basically anything you could imagine could like basically anything you could buy or own could have like a corresponding NFT. And, in the traditional art world, it would be nice to have a corresponding like proof on the blockchain that like this art piece was created at this time and it was transferred to this other person. And, every time you transfer the physical piece, you transfer the token with it, so that you don't ever have this problem of like, oh, someone showed up with a piece of art and they have a certificate, but like, is that the legit certificate? Is this even like the legit piece of art? So you have like provenance, and you can basically like timestamping and provenance is like what's awesome about NFTs, and you can use it to like basically track anything. I think we're going to see like tokenized securities as well. So like stocks will become tokenized. So I do think that there's a bit of a bubble with NFT art right now, especially with like, I don't know if you guys are following this, but like animal themed like collections, basically like, they did apes, they did lions, they did penguins. It's like, now there were eagles, and the eagles, someone asked the eagle guys why they did eagles, and they said eagles was all that was left. So, I think we're sort of like past peak animal collections of NFTs. So, I do think some people might lose some money on some of those, but as far as like art goes, like pieces that are, basically like digital art, or someone selling like a photograph of like a physical piece that they've done, I don't think that we're really like in a bubble with that stuff. I think it's an awesome opportunity for artists who've been early to the space, who've put their work, who've minted their work, to basically just like sell to a wider audience. And it's sort of like just having your art in a gallery But instead of people having to like walk through your gallery and see it, you have basically like a jillion crypto millionaires who like, have nothing else to do but like collect art and, flex online. So it's like, in a way, so I think the artists that have established like a price for their work, like in the traditional world of like, gallery representation and stuff like that, you kind of have a price for your work and it like goes up over time. And those same artists, if they're putting their work online, it pretty much is selling for like what they would sell it for, I think. Maybe a little bit more, but it's not like totally crazy. There's some like rules to figure out sort of like what an artist's like work is worth. But I think some of these NFT collections, like CryptoPunks or like apes, I think some of them, like there's just so many and they're not really differentiated. And, I think some of these collectibles that are like sort of like time sensitive collectibles, like they're hot for a moment. I think if you go look at like Hollywood memorabilia or even like old sports cards and stuff like that, like the value of those things kind of like fade over time as the people who care about them like die off basically, so, and unless the thing is like of some major historical significance where that like, kind of like traverses generations, or if there's like some major marketing budget behind it, like I think like a Mickey Mouse NFT, would do really well, or even like old Mickey Mouse collectibles might do really well still even today. But like, some random like hot baseball player from like the 50s or something, unless he was like some like crazy, Babe Ruth or something like that, like absolutely legendary. I think, that kind of stuff is probably going to just lose like 90% of its value over time as like a new generation maybe stops caring about baseball entirely, or just doesn't like have any kind of like sentimental connection to the person, because they didn't go to the games or something like that. So yeah, I think there's a bit of a bubble in some segments, but overall, I don't think NFTs are such a broad category, and there's so also within art there's a lot of diversity. So I would say generally no, it's not a bubble, but yeah, certainly in some parts.
Do you see NFTs becoming a viable way for in-game items to attract demand?
Yeah, this is a good question. There's a project called Loot, which basically has created the items first as NFTs, and then like the expectation is that people will basically build games around these items. I'm pretty skeptical of this, despite this project having like a bunch of VC backing currently. I think that from what I know of games, from my time in the gaming world, the game developers like to have like lock-in, and having items in the game they control. And it's another thing, like game developers sometimes want to change the game mechanics or change the stats of an item, or introduce like new items, basically like obsolete all the old items. They also want to like control the economy. So like, there could be something that happens like, item exploits, for example, that allow you to just like print more items. They might be able to want to like wipe out the whole set of items that have been copied. So there are all these like economy management things that I think a game developer really wants to control. And also like once you're like accumulating wealth inside of the game, this is like part of the stickiness of the game. It's like there's some friction there to just like switch. Like you can't just take all of your gear off your World of Warcraft character and like move it to like EverQuest or whatever, that easily. I mean, you can try to sell your character. That's against the terms of service. If you get caught, you might get your account banned. You might lose everything. So you can like try to do it kind of like through a black market way. And there's some risk. But that's like it increases stickiness for the game. So I think that I'm like pretty skeptical. I hope that I'm proven wrong, because I think it'll be really interesting if someone manages to figure this out. I think there will be like basically like non-functional items that make their way into games, like cosmetic items, or like we're already seeing like these like the animal collections of NFTs like used as like avatars on like Twitter. Like people are posting those as a Twitter profile or like profile image on like other social media platforms. And I think that could be something that is supported within games, like, you know, in Decentraland or some like metaverse type of system. Like you could have like an art gallery inside of your virtual house or something where you put up all your NFTs that you have. So I think like that kind of stuff will be supported, but in terms of like functional items that like, you know, have like a flaming sword of like vanquishment or something like that in World of Warcraft, like how would I move that to another game? You know, like I mean, you could have some kind of like value there, but you know, I think it's just hard. It sort of like confines the design process. So I'm skeptical there.
So the industry has changed a lot since you first got into it. It's blown up. Are there any other verticals right now that you feel like are like crypto back when you first joined?
Outside of crypto?
Yeah.
I think like robotics is really exciting. I think like space travel is really exciting. You know, like looking forward to like mining some asteroids and getting a home Tesla robot to like do my laundry and stuff like that. So I think that's like, you know, that's the future. Like if I could work on something else, it would probably be like, you know, pain points in my life for like doing chores around the house. So like I would like work on some kind of home robotics or something like that.
Differently, what do you think the next killer apps in this space will be?
Like I said, I think everything's going to become tokenized. I think that there will be wallets that basically support arbitrary assets. I think that you're going to see like a lot more barter happening with NFTs. You know, I think the killer app of blockchain really is like the disintermediation of the legacy financial system, you know, and all of the archaic rules that, you know, presume to require like some middleman for a transaction. So, you know, I think like beyond just basic trading, you know, we're seeing like full decentralized exchanges that support like leverage, that support lending, that support insurance. So there's all sorts of like opportunities to like earn yield, which are like above like, you know, orders of magnitude above like what you get in bank account. So I think that's like massively going to affect like the financial system. And we're already seeing like pushback from the SEC on this. I mean, I think it's such a threat to the legacy system that, you know, in the face of like earning 5% yield on like a crypto account, you know, the banks are basically worried like, why is anyone going to keep any money with us anymore? And, you know, I think you're seeing like that concern come through our head of treasury, Janet Yellen, and you're seeing it come through the head of the SEC, Gensler. And I think we're going to see increasing pressure from regulators and legislators to try to control space for the sake of protecting the legacy institution. So I think the main, like, you know, the main important innovation of crypto is that like you don't have to trust someone else with your keys, and you know, they can't go and shut down these decentralized networks. So as long as you control your keys, you can engage with these networks no matter what the regulator says. And I think a lot of people in the US have been left out of some really great opportunities in crypto. I mean, New York especially because of the bit license, but I mean, even just like Solana as an example, the US residents were prevented from participating in the Solana presale. And if you had, you'd be up you know, like 1,000,000x right now. So, you know, that's pretty bad. So, I mean, it basically forces people to like go offshore or find, you know, a way around the system, because at this point it's past its usefulness, and it's doing more harm to consumers, I think, than it is protecting them. Yeah, I think I like, you know, went off on a rant there. But yeah, so I think it's you know, the big innovation is DeFi in general, and you know, beyond just like Bitcoin as a replacement for fiat currencies, which I think is like amazing. I think like replacing the whole financial system is also amazing. That's coming.
So you obviously know a lot about fundraising, Kraken, having raised multiple different rounds. For those young entrepreneurs in the room who have startups already or are looking to start something, what is your advice on securing funding?
Yeah, well, it was super hard back in the day. You basically had to explain to investors why they should even care about Bitcoin. And then why Bitcoin's not going to get regulated out of existence and why it's going to be different from e-gold. And, there was so much negative sentiment. And actually, the last company, which is called Loot, the virtual goods business, was fully bootstrapped. It was basically profitable from day one. We didn't raise any capital. So, when I had this idea, I lived in California most of my life, and I had this idea of like the Silicon Valley VC being this like visionary risk taker. And what I found when I went to talk to them was like, these guys are just freaking clueless, and they're followers. All they want to see is like, oh, did Andreessen write you a check? Cool, I'm in. Oh, and you haven't got a check from Andreessen? Oh, well, I don't know, like seems risky, And the guys just like are laggards, like they're followers, and I think they like to be in a space that's like developed, where they can compare you to something else. Like, oh, you're just like Uber. You're basically Uber, but like, with a pink logo. Okay, I understand that. Cool. All right, I'll write you a check. Like, I think it's very hard for them to like come into write a check on like a brand new space that's like just totally like greenfield, like blue ocean opportunity. It's like, it's totally bizarre because you would think like these are the juiciest opportunities with the most margins, and like it's just like completely the opposite basically. So I would say like, I had like a fairly negative experience trying to deal with VCs. But in the end, we found some good investors. It was mostly through like Bitcoin angels, basically, like guys that got into Bitcoin super early individually and liked what we were doing, and like obviously like understood the space and understood our position in the space. And then we had like one real professional investor who was Hummingbird Ventures, who was actually like a Belgian fund. And it might just be because they were in Europe, they kind of understood, I think, like the payments better. And I think they were less concerned about like the US regulatory regime, like crushing us. But we spent a bunch of time with them, and they had one partner there who was like going really deep on crypto. So that was super helpful. But, I think ultimately, I think they just took a chance. I think they didn't really know if it was going to work out, but I think they thought like, if it does work out, it's going to be huge. And they were right, fortunately. But, there've been so many other crypto companies that have failed too. And there've been, many crypto winters over the years. I would say like, if my experience out of Silicon Valley, like if I were going to start another company today, what I would do and what I didn't do, last time when starting this company was like, I didn't go through any accelerators. We had enough money from the last business to basically like, we had a few $1 million, and we thought like, okay, we're having a really hard time like with VCs. They don't really understand this. Let's just try to get this as far as we can on our own dime before we go back and like try to raise money. And I think the downside of that was that like we could take it pretty far with the amount of money that we had. And what happened was, this is like part of the metagame of Silicon Valley is basically, what happened in that time was like Coinbase came about. So we'd actually started first, but Coinbase went through Y Combinator. Because they went through Y Combinator, they basically had that like stamp of approval. And you pretty much like, if you go through YC, you pretty much like are guaranteed like investment from like a top tier firm, unless you're just like a total dumpster fire. So like they managed to sign up a few top tier VCs, and there are tons of followers that will come along with those top tier VCs, and that also gets you like just a ton of clout with like banks, with people you want to recruit. It's just like a stamp of approval basically, and I think by not having that and by allowing Coinbase to have that, it sort of put us at like a big disadvantage. And when we finally went to raise, we went to Andreessen, and Andreessen said, well, you're directly competitive with Coinbase. Yeah, we love your business. We think the space is like gonna explode, but we already made our bet. So, we were sort of like, the first time we went out, we were like too early. And when we came back around, we were too late. So I would say like, think about that basically. I mean, even if you think you can bootstrap, I mean, it's good to have some people on your team, in your corner, who will talk to banks for you, who will recruit for you, who will, basically guide you through like all of the problems that you might see as a startup. So I would say like I undervalued that. And I wasn't thinking about like, I need to make like a competitive block here. I need to just like throw my shares at any top tier VC that will take them, just so I like block them from investing in my competitor. So I would say like, if you can go through like some top tier accelerator, like go through YC if you can, and then like try to get money from like top tier Silicon Valley fund. If you're in a space that you think is going to be like competitive, basically, like if you think you might get blocked out by someone who might invest in you, investing in your competitor first. The downside of like investors is just that like sometimes they can be a pain in the ass, So I mean, the good ones will provide a lot of value. They'll provide all kinds of connections and great experience. Bad ones will just like hassle you. They'll be like, hey, where are my audited financials? Hey, I had some crazy idea like from sitting on the sidelines, and I want to like, waste your time and like try to convince you to like do something stupid with your business. Basically there's someone you then have to like report to, and if things go south with them, they could make your life difficult. They could file lawsuits against you. They could become like an activist. There's just all sorts of issues. So, I think like we were kind of like in a unique position in the early days of Bitcoin, and that like it was just like a brand new industry, and there weren't like other really like major existing competitors out there. But I think no matter what I did, if I were going to start a new company, I would do an accelerator. It would at least give me the optionality to like take more money if I wanted it. And I would definitely be cautious about like giving up control. I mean, something that I think is that we did well was we didn't sell that much of the company, and the founders still have a third of the company. We gave a lot of equity away to employees. They have a third of the company, and investors have about a third of the company today. So I would say like that's another thing to be careful of, is like, create some like founder class shares for yourself, or some kind of like shares with like additional voting rights or something, so that even if you end up selling more of the company, you don't end up really giving up like complete control to the investors. And I've seen some crazy shit go down. Like, investors are playing their own game. Like they're not necessarily aligned with your interests. It might seem like that, that like, of course they're invested in my company, they want me to be successful, but they might also be invested in a company that would benefit from your demise, or, they might be interested in like, for whatever reason, like funds are usually set up to run for 10 years, and then they've got to basically like sell everything and wind down and pay out their LPs. So you could also be in a position where like you have an investor who's been great, and it's 10 years down the road, and they're like, hey, okay, we got to close up the fund. We got to like sell everything. And, it could just be bad timing for you for some reason, So, I think once an investor becomes more desperate to sell their stake for whatever reason, like they could just become more adversarial. So I think that's just something to keep in mind too. I like before taking money from real VCs, I hadn't considered like the investor's business, and that potentially not being like fully aligned with my business. So that's just something to think about, like who else are they invested in? Is there some scenario down the line where basically you're sacrificed to like, have give them a bigger payday with some other company they have a bigger stake in or something like that.
Okay, so before we open it up to some questions, I wanted to get your opinion on the whole SEC Coinbase situation. Where does Kraken come into this? And are you afraid of potentially getting sued as well?
Yeah, I think all the large US crypto companies probably have ongoing dialogue with all the big regulators. We have a very similar product that's basically already launched outside of the United States. We didn't launch it in the United States because of exactly like what just happened to Coinbase. We thought like high probability the SEC is going to think this is a security and we're going to get in trouble for it. So I think that I think the laws just need to change because this is clearly not like consumer protection. People are being like protected from like earning like juicy yields, not from like any kind of like actual scam. Meanwhile, actual scams are just like running rampant all over the place, and the SEC is not doing anything about it. So I think there's like a couple tiers to the problem. I think one, the SEC would just tell you, look, we're just like doing what the law says. We just read the law and then we enforce it. And if you want something to change, go to the legislature, go to Congress and like get the law changed. So the industry is obviously trying to do that too. But I think there needs to be like some understanding at the level of the regulator as well, just on like what's good public policy. And unfortunately, the guy who is now the head of the SEC is like a former Goldman Sachs dude, right? So like, I'm sure all of his old homies are like, hey, dude, like definitely don't let this like, people get 5% yields on their crypto, like, we're gonna be out of business. So there's definitely like this revolving door with like the legacy system and like the regulatory apparatus. And I think it doesn't help to have like people like Elizabeth Warren out there just like espouting like absolutely like false information and just like madness. Meanwhile, she like claims to be against like the big banks and the financial institutions, yet at the same time like somehow anti-crypto. So like I don't get what's going on there. Janet Yellen is like, she got like $7 million last year for speaking engagements from like Citibank and like, all the big banks. So I think the regulatory branch of the government basically is like completely captured by industry, the legacy industry anyway. Sometimes you talk to like the policy people at these regulators like the SEC and the policy people like won't understand why the enforcement people are doing what they're doing. It's sort of like two separate arms that like aren't really talking to each other. And sometimes you can get the policy people to talk to the enforcement people. But I think in the case of the SEC here with this particular issue, I think Gensler is pretty like certain about what he wants to do. I don't think he really cares about what's right for consumers. I think he's using the fact that the law is like 80 years old and, predates the internet even, that it's an opportunity for a land grab and an opportunity to stifle crypto, I think, which, benefits his former employer. So I don't know, there are a lot of problems here. There's also like just the order of enforcement issue, and this is like, this is a problem with like any sort of like enforcement, criminal justice system, as well as like, okay, there's like an unlimited amount of crimes out there, right? Like more than anyone could ever prosecute. So how do you decide who you're going to go after? And the selective enforcement thing is like a major issue because what we've seen is like US regulators selectively enforcing against like the low-hanging fruit, basically, like who are the legit like known targets in the United States that would be like very easy to subpoena, very easy to drag into court. So the guys here, Kraken, Coinbase, Gemini, we're all here trying to be like good citizens. And for that, what we get is basically like attacked first. And we're like, hey, wait a minute, okay, well, we'll shut down our yield program, we'll shut down our margin program, but like, okay, what are you going to do about like the 16 like Chinese exchanges that like are doing the same thing? And they're like, oh, well, yeah, those guys are kind of be like hard to go after. So like, maybe we'll do them later. we're like, okay, so what, like in the meantime, they're gonna have a competitive advantage against us because they have a product that consumers actually want. So when we shut this product off, like, what do you think is gonna happen? Of course, like, people are gonna take their money off our platform and they're gonna take it to like the Chinese exchange. And then what happens, like, you basically just like kill domestic business. On top of that, law enforcement is generally not happy about the approach to regulation in the United States because from law enforcement's perspective, they love to just send us subpoenas all day long. Like we get like 3 subpoenas every day for like information related to some like criminal investigation and like touches cryptocurrency somehow. So, the FBI and like basically every 3-letter organization in government is like contacting us for information constantly. And I think these guys are pretty happy with the current state of things. Like they can call us, they send us a subpoena, they get the information the next day. It's like totally cool. Whereas if they have to go to some offshore venue to try to get the information, there's like this process called MLAT, which basically goes through some like international review process. And it's like 6 months later that they'll actually like get the information, if ever, like if the company even responds to them. So from law enforcement's perspective, this approach to regulation is basically hurting their work as well. Right? They're making it harder to get information. More people are doing their crypto transactions offshore. That means like less information available onshore. And then there's the problem of like basically legislating by guidance or legislating through enforcement actions, where effectively like they rather than so there's like so much gray area in the law because these laws are so old and they make all these assumptions about like the state of things, which is like just completely changed over the last 80 years. There's like a lot of gray area. Like there's not like a lot of explicit law that addresses cryptocurrency, and regulators try to like make analogies and like think like, okay, like it's kind of like, there's like the classic like Orange Grove analogy to like, how do you define like what a security is for purposes of like, the SEC's like supervision. And, that's like basically where we're at. They're like taking like some 80-year-old case about orange groves and trying to say like, cryptocurrency is like somehow like that. So it's just like totally crazy. But basically what they're doing is finding little guys and like throwing an enforcement action at them, or basically like a threat, like, hey, we think random coin you're trading is a security. And if we're right about that, the penalties for that are basically like $5,000 per transaction for all of like history that you've done. So like you add it up, you're like, oh shit, we've done like 1 million trades of that coin. And so it's like, oh, okay, so yeah, so that's going to be, like $500 million if we're right, so then like the fines are so egregious. I mean, and it's the same problem with like the criminal justice system as well, right? We're like, you're like innocent of a crime and they come to you like, okay, yeah, we think you stole that cigarette. It's going to be 20 years, 20 years minimum. And you're like, whoa, like I'm innocent though. They're like, well, if you take 2 years, we can settle this. And you're like, you're innocent, but you take 2 years because like, you don't want to roll the dice on like getting 20 for stealing a cigarette. So it's like the same thing with these penalties available for financial services. It's like so out of control. Like the penalties available are so egregious that like, and the technology is so complicated that you can't really roll the dice on like some 80-year-old judge understanding everything that's going on and also citing against the government's case. When I think the default is for them to just be like, I don't understand any of this. I can barely work my phone. The SEC says that these guys are bad, then I'm going with that. So it's just like a really bad situation. And so what they've been doing is kind of like going around and like picking off these little guys, getting them to settle, and then using those settlements as sort of like precedent to other enforcement actions. They'll say like, yeah, we just settled against these guys for this, and if you don't settle with us, it's basically you're going to suffer this horrible fate. So this is bad because unless you're really facing like an existential threat from them, or like I think Ripple is now, you kind of like you almost can't afford to fight it. You're just like, okay, what like us with margin trading, we're like, okay, what is that business worth to us in the United States? X dollars. Okay, what's the worst case scenario? Like, we fight this. What are like the worst case penalties? And there's like, you just do the math. And you're like, okay, I guess we're gonna settle and like we'll turn the product off because it's just not worth like $5 trillion fine to like be wrong in the end. Even though even if you might think you're like 100% correct, and they have like basically no theory to like actually like win this case on, it's just like you just can't roll the dice. So the regulatory situation is messed up all around. I think the only answer is like very explicit and clear new laws that make it so the regulators cannot use this gray area to try to like, basically legislate by way of guidances, which are not law, or enforcement actions.
All right, so that concludes the speaking part. And now we'll open it up to some questions.
You speak to it and just go ahead. I think so. Just speak up.
Hey Jesse, thank you for coming. This has been awesome. So I was really curious. I remember reading something about Kraken getting the banking license to soar. I think it was Wyoming last year. Like, what do you guys plan on doing with that? Do you plan on expanding that sort of activity elsewhere?
Yeah, for sure. So the banking license in Wyoming, it's called the SPDI, Special Purpose Depository Institution. A special new kind of bank created by Wyoming, which basically is like a full reserve bank. So you can't do like fractional lending for like home loans and stuff like that. Effectively will allow us to do all sorts of stuff, to do like what's called like qualified custody, which matters basically to like other regulated financial institutions who might want to custody their crypto with us. It also, so a banking license basically like obviates the need for state by state money transmitter licenses. So it also sort of like solves a problem for us, and basically just having like one regulator sort of like to cover like all of our basic like payments and banking types of services versus having like a regulator in every state covering us. So basically what it allows us to do is create like full real legit bank accounts for every Kraken user. We'll get like a routing number, account number, debit card, checkbook, if you want to like throw back, like all the normal stuff. So you'll be able to have like your paycheck deposited directly into your Kraken account. Basically, it's just like a normal bank transfer. And then from there, like, auto conversion to Bitcoin or whatever, you want to do.
And you could use that with users outside of Wyoming?
Yeah, all actually internationally eventually, but start the full United States.
Sweet, thank you.
Yeah. In front.
Max, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Are you aware of any, let's say, like social or political think tanks for crypto? And if not, would you see any value in that? One of those being created?
Yeah, I don't know about like, a think tank about sort of like the social implications of it, of crypto, but there's like Coin Center as an example is sort of think tank, sort of like lobbying group, sort of like education group, which is doing like tons of awesome work in DC. I mean, those are the guys that are like on the ground meeting with legislators, like constantly trying to prevent bad law from being created and to get good law. And there's an industry organization called the Blockchain Association, which basically represents like corporate interests in crypto, sort of representing like the businesses. There's not really like, I think like great consumer representation. And this is something like a bunch of other CEOs in the space have been talking about recently, is like getting together some kind of like PAC or like super PAC to represent like crypto consumers basically. Because I think, ultimately, I mean, for us, we're a global business, we could shut off the United States and still have a very successful business. But for the consumers in the country, I think like we're going to see more pushback from the legacy system. And, just like we've seen with like Uber, for example, there are these like entrenched interests that want to protect their position. And, like, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like, you guys might not even remember like pre-Uber days, but like, it used to be a total nightmare to get a taxi, like, anywhere in California. So Uber was like a massive upgrade. And yet, in many places it was like illegal actually, even though it was like a huge upgrade for the consumers. So I think we need to get more consumers involved in the discussion. And I think we need to show Washington that like people are really behind this. It's not just like you can pick off a few companies and like this is going to go away. It's like I think the genie's out of the bottle now, but I think they don't really realize like how many people are in crypto and care about crypto. Because stuff like what we saw with this infrastructure bill where they tried to like slide in this language at the last minute under the pretense of like collecting more taxes. I think there's just like shady stuff going on, and the crypto industry rallied and like everyone tweeted and like people made phone calls. And, I think that's what matters at the end of the day to the politicians. It's like, they'll pick on you if they think they can run you over, but if you blow up their phone lines, and like make it known that like you're going to vote against them, you're going to vote them out in the next election, or you're going to be donating to their competitor in the next election or whatever. I think that's the stuff that matters for them. I think ultimately they want to keep their jobs.
Yeah, because I'm curious about it from this sort of grassroots level. I think you got a woman who's going up for a congressional seat who's tapping on Jack Dorsey's shoulder from the Bay Area. So
Yeah.
I'm curious about sort of what grassroots efforts are fomenting and what help those might have at a local level dispersed all around the United States. Ultimately, this SEC stuff right now is not the first stuff not the last stuff that's going to come in.
Yeah, for sure. I think there needs to be a lot more. We're starting to see some politicians like take up the issue, and I think we need to like make it known that the community like supports those politicians and make it an issue that everyone needs to care about. But yeah, I've thought about like we should start some kind of like Church of Bitcoin or something like that.
I got asked to be the first disciple last week at Crypto Monday.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think, I don't know, we got to get people more organized. Mask at the back.
Yes, so I'm Johnny. Thank you for speaking with us. Since you're running one of the biggest crypto exchanges in the world, do you feel any pressure to be in the spotlight as some big public figure, or would you rather stay under the radar?
I definitely prefer to stay under the radar. Personally, like I'm a very private person. People have sent me, since working at the company, all kinds of threats. I got sent like a booby trap package one time as well, like ransom letters and like crazy stuff. So, I definitely prefer to keep like a low profile. I think the ideal scenario for any like crypto holders is to like be unknown that like you hold crypto at all or you're involved in crypto at all. But there's definitely like a value to being like a known figure, and that's that like like I guess any like influencer, you have people that like look to you and will maybe like do what you encourage them to do from time to time. And so I think you can help to shape like the narrative and encourage people to participate. So that's definitely like a positive for being out in space. And I always think you should lead by example as well. And I think that, having someone out there who's like a positive example, I think is encouraging to others. So, you don't obviously get that by being like an anonymous shadow figure.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for coming. Actually, I have two questions. The first one is, what's your opinion on NBA Top Shot? Why do you think it succeed? And the second one is, do you think this mode can work in other fields like sneaker or fashion?
Yeah, I think so. So I think NBA Top Shots are really cool. Are they going to hold their value? I don't know. Like there was a lot of hype into them, but like, there's like an unlimited number of like great moments in basketball, so like how many Top Shots can they print? I think that's something that like, I don't know if they've said this, but like, potentially for any like, let's say like a dunk, you might have like 6+ cameras like on the dude at one time. So like, is that like 6 NFTs? Like, can you cut it like a second longer, a second shorter? like, is there any sort of like finiteness to this NFT or, you know, I mean, have they said they're not gonna print like 20 more of them later in a subsequent edition? You know, so I think that like, if you look at other like collectible cards, like other sports cards and stuff, like they haven't held value really well over time. So I'm somewhat skeptical of that. And some of these Top Shots, like they got bid up so crazy high that I just find it hard to believe that they're gonna hold their value. So I'm skeptical of that. Sorry, what was the second question?
Is this mode working in other fields?
Oh,
like
yeah.
sneaker, fashion, or?
Yeah, I think you'll see like there are already some luxury fashion brands that are doing cool things, like giving you like an NFT when you buy like a particular article of like clothing or a bag or something like that. There's this project called Genies. They're working with a bunch of luxury brands where basically like you can buy NFTs of like digital, you know, like a Gucci sweater or something like that, and you can wear it like on your virtual avatar. So I think stuff like that will happen. I think like NFTs as like a certificate of authenticity for luxury goods, I think is going to be like a massive thing. You know, like the market, the amount of money lost by like Louis Vuitton to like fake bags being sold on the streets of New York, you know, it's probably like massive. So I think like having that provenance, that token that you can like transfer with a bag to know like, am I buying a legit bag or not, if you care, is going to be like a huge deal. So I think those are like the main things, you know, like the authenticity thing, I think is gonna like watches, you know, is gonna be like the thing as well. Yeah, I think like the secondary market for luxury goods is gonna be like heavily reliant on NFTs in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you see central banks as an obstacle to crypto success?
For sure, yeah. I mean, it seems like if you look at like the IMF and some central banks out there, I mean, it's crazy the kinds of statements that they make. They're like, there's zero transparency and nothing backing this currency. You know, like, are you talking about the dollar or are you talking about like, are you misunderstanding Bitcoin? You know, it's funny, like the criticisms they have of cryptocurrency are like, you know, even worse criticisms of their own program. So I think they're definitely coming after it. I mean, there is this like existential threat created by the removal of fiat currencies, you know, from the world. I mean, so much control of the world is generated through like fiat currencies, right? Like all of the inflation, the money printing, which is financing wars and stuff like that. I mean, you know, if you had to go out and like get votes to go to war, it's like, or you know, collect checks to like finance, you know, the war in Afghanistan for 20 years in a row. You know, I don't think that things would like drag on like that. You know, it wouldn't be as popular. So I think they are afraid. I do think that there's like, you know, another side of this, which is like, there are actually like some good use cases, some reasons to use a fiat currency or a community currency where you might want to do like, you know, it really might be the best answer to like massively inflate the quantity of the currency, you know, where you can't really like, you know, you just need to like buy something quickly, like because the country's like in some emergency situation that you can't really like tell everyone about without freaking everybody out, you know. So it's like, oh shit, okay, we got to buy like 5 more nukes right now. We're all gonna get like blasted, you know. Like you can't really like tell people that. maybe you could tell them that, I don't know. But you know, like there are instances where you might just want to like be able to print money, you know. But I think that it would be nice if that was like an optional system or like, you know, an alternative, not like the only system. Yeah, for sure.
I was wondering, given that you were so early in on Bitcoin, did you ever consider doing maybe like a hard fork of Bitcoin, like Litecoin or Feathercoin? And also, were you ever approached, especially early on in the 2010s, to work on like an early crypto project? Or?
No, I never thought about personally doing any forks, and I was never approached directly to like work on any projects other than like Ripple. So yeah, I guess I was just not, you know, I thought like Bitcoin was like the thing. I worked on Ripple a bit because I knew Jed, who's the founder of Ripple. And I thought the original idea was more of like a Hawala type of like credit network, like balancing credits between like friends and stuff like that, not what it is today with like XRP. Yeah, so I think that answers your question. Yeah. Pretty sure.
What advice do you have for entrepreneurs who are looking to recognize trends early within industries?
Good question. You know, I think like something that I do is, or I think it helps me spot trends is I'm just like constantly trying out new things. Like I'm on Product Hunt all the time, just like seeing what's coming through Product Hunt, like new things that are launching. I just try like a lot of things out, you know, like, I love to work in like Excel and spreadsheets and stuff. So like anything that comes out, it's like remotely like Airtable or Notion or like these kinds of things, like I just try out and try to get a sense of like, you know, often I'll try to like build the same thing in different platforms and see like, you know, how easy or hard is it to build something there. So that would be like a way to maybe like identify like maybe who's like a leader in a space. Yeah, I think Product Hunt is great. I think like travel is also like amazing just in general of like spotting things, you know, where like you get to another country and it's like, oh, they don't sell burritos here. Like, what am I gonna do? Oh, I could start a burrito shop. Like I bet like, you know, everyone coming through here from another country, from America would like buy a burrito from me. You know, so there's like just traveling, I think you can see things where like, especially in the money space, because in the more developed world, especially in the United States, and this is even like a comment from someone in Treasury at the United States, like a few years ago, said, why would anyone need Bitcoin? My credit card works just fine. It's like, you obviously have like never traveled like anywhere like in the world, you know, like not everyone in the world has access to like credit cards. So I think just getting out there and like seeing how other people live their lives and like what friction they have and like how they've solved that locally, I think could be like a good idea that is often like portable to other markets. You know, you see how they like solve a particular problem in India or something, like you might be able to take that to Cambodia and like, you know, start a business there like with the same solution. Back here.
Alex, thanks for your time. You were talking about how the US is not being able to keep up with innovation in terms of regulation. So what opportunities do you see in this space? Also the shift of power from government to maybe DAOs, and also in terms of residency optimization. And for example, if you were to start now a new venture, would you do it in the US or would you consider another alternatives? Or
Yeah, I think DAOs are like super interesting, and you know, this is like another area which is sort of like hamstrung by the current regulatory environment, you know, where it should be possible to have basically a DAO operating a business, but like technically, you know, it's like not really in the United States. If I were going to start another business, it probably depends on what it is. The US is still a massively huge and wealthy market, and you know, I think it would be hard not to target the US market. You know, I think you'd be, unless you've developed a product that you think serves like some niche like geography, I think, or if you think you're gonna face like a lot of like regulatory heat, you know, I think if you think you're gonna get in a lot of regulatory trouble, probably better to not start in the United States. You know, I would start in Singapore, or, you know, look at a country, like you do some research on this and like figure out, you know, who doesn't have an extradition treaty, who is normally a pain in the ass to America, you know, like Russia, China, like, you know, if you think America is going to be coming after you, and you want to serve US customers, like you obviously like don't want to be sitting here where they can like haul you to jail. So I would say like, you know, you're much more likely to like get away and grow your business, you know, in another place. And often, you know, like I was just discussing earlier, they might be aware of you or not, you know, but most likely it seems like the MO for the US regulators is to like go after domestic companies first. So, you know, what we've seen with like Binance as an example, like massive exchange, completely like ignored regulations for years, now is getting like a lot of heat about it. But, you know, now they've got like billions of dollars in the bank account to deal with the problem. So, sometimes like if you subject yourself to like a regime that basically, makes your business illegal from day one, you're not gonna get anywhere. On the other hand, if you can get away with it for long enough, you build this war chest and then you can sort of like re-enter the market legitimately by hiring former regulators or, just paying tons of lawyers. So this is definitely not like a risk-free, but I would say if you're doing like a fully legit business, I think the United States is still the best place to do it, especially if you're raising capital. Wait, sure.
What are your thoughts on a lot of major banks starting to interact in cryptocurrencies and accept that? Are you excited at the prospect of that becoming more widely accepted, or do you kind of see that as a competitor?
Sorry, did you say automated banks?
No, like a lot of major US banks,
major
like
banks.
Wells Fargo,
Yeah.
those guys starting to get involved with it.
I think that's awesome. Yeah, I mean, they're definitely competitive at some level, but like, I think the reality is, even for like PayPal, they're only supporting like 5 coins, whereas like Kraken supports like 70+ coins. So if you're deep into crypto, the Wells Fargo offering or whatever is probably not gonna really satisfy you. On the other hand, it does expose crypto to way more people and creates new like points of entry and helps to legitimize the whole space. So I think it's overall a good thing. I think in the long term, it's going to be very hard for like a Wells Fargo to compete with somebody like Kraken. Because even though I think they can support a few coins, but like, I don't think anybody we hire like would ever go to work for Wells Fargo. And that probably goes for like 99% of competent crypto developers as well. If they're faced with the choice of like taking a job at Kraken or Wells Fargo, I think it's like a no-brainer for them. So I don't think that these guys are even going to be capable of like building much of this stuff in-house. And so they'll have to outsource and they'll probably, come to places like Kraken to get liquidity or to get access to other coins eventually.
I think that's good for tonight. So we'd all like to give Jesse a round of applause. Thank you.
You guys have any other questions, like feel free to tag me on Twitter at Jesse Powell, or you can shoot me an email, Jesse, Jesse @kraken.com. Cool. Thanks, everyone.